Hi, I'm David Meinz. Thanks for joining me today for Immune Power. This is the first part of our three-part series. In part 2, called Brain Power, we'll discuss how to make sure your mind is working at maximum efficiency. You've heard it said that we only use about 10% of our brain. That's just a myth. In fact, the majority of our brain is almost always active. We'll show you how to make sure it stays that way. And finally, part 3 is called Vitamin Power, where we'll look at what I call the Super 7. Super 7 nutrients that you need to seriously consider for optimal health. My guess is that several of them are going to be a surprise to you. And now for Immune Power. You know, the COVID virus has changed our planet and those of us who live here. Over 1 million people have died. Many more have gotten sick. Whether you're still working from home or you've gone back to the office, whether we've got a vaccine or we're still fighting it, it's important that you maximize your body's natural immunity now and for the rest of your life. Of course, everyone knows that older people are at higher risk from all kinds of problems, including COVID. But as experience has shown us, people at any age can come down with the disease, and some can die from it. From what we've learned so far, it appears that you are at a greater risk of COVID infection and complications if you're overweight, have high blood pressure, have high blood sugar, and a couple of others as well. That's many people right there. The data is pretty clear. People who are healthy and active and control their weight have a better ability to fight the virus. And the vaccine is more effective for those people as well. The healthier you are, the healthier you stay. Here's what we'll discuss today. There are 7 major steps you can take to improve your immunity. They include common sense strategies like getting your normal flu shot, eating well, and exercise, and some others that may be a surprise to you. So let's begin. Number 1, an ounce of prevention. Almost 300 years ago, Benjamin Franklin said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. He was right. Here's what we know helps improve your immune function and decrease your chances of getting the flu and/or colds. First of all, minimize your exposure to viruses. You've heard it before, but it's important. Wash your hands frequently, do it with soap, and keep them away from your nose and eyes. By the way, washing your hands should take about 60 seconds. That's 2 to 3 times longer than I usually do, and probably you too. And hands that are slightly wet are more likely to transfer bacteria and viruses to and from the next surface you touch. Always dry your hands well after washing. Get your flu shot. Flu viruses change from year to year, so get it annually. And do it in October or November so the vaccine can get to its full effectiveness as the flu season matures. Getting a flu vaccine is more important than ever because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Flu vaccination is especially important for people who are at high risk for flu, many of whom are also at high risk for COVID-19 or other serious outcomes. And don't do silly things like using tobacco products. Have you seen this on YouTube? He's smoking a cigarette under his face mask. Apparently, he doesn't want COVID interfering with his lung cancer. Number 2, eat well. Now, I don't mean eat a lot, I mean eat good quality food. A nutritional deficiency can negatively affect your immune system. So be sure to hit your goal of 5 cups total of fruits and vegetables a day. Of the 2, emphasize the vegetables. A more plant-based diet can decrease your risk of getting cancer too. New research just published by Archer Daniel Midlands found that 77% of consumers are trying to eat healthier and boost their immunity. A study done by the Kroger grocery store chain, which is America's largest, found the consumers are eating more vegetables and citrus-containing fruits to boost their immunity as well. The new plant-based meat alternatives are also gaining popularity. Here's how you should eat. It's not that complicated. There really are only 2 kinds of food in the grocery store: real food and fun food. Real food is fruits, vegetables, whole grains, breads and cereals, a calcium source like milk or the milk alternatives, and a protein source like meat, chicken, or fish, and beans. They should be the foundation of everything you eat. The other category is fun food. Most of the grocery store is made up of fun foods, packaged, highly processed. If you have to eat them, you get those 2 days a week on weekends just for fun. So remember, there's two kinds of food in the grocery store. There's real food, and then there's fun food. Real food, eat that Monday through Friday. Fun food, that's for the weekends. So real food, like post-shredded wheat, you can't get much more basic than this. It's close to the way it grows, and that's what you're looking for. It's good, it's basic, and it's incredibly boring. I know, but you can live without sprinkles. Here's smart water. This is fun food. This is not real food. This is water with some nutrients added. And you know what? This stuff doesn't work. I've purchased gallons of this and nothing. Here's another fun food for you. Dunkin' Mocha Latte. Cereal. Coffee cereal. I'm not sure if I should eat this or drink this. Oops. It's all berries. They made a mistake at the factory. They only put berries, Captain Crunch berries. They didn't put any Captain Crunch in there. What are we going to do? By the way, have you ever seen a crunch berry tree? Me either. Here's Haagen-Dazs. You familiar with Haagen-Dazs? Now, Haagen-Dazs is Swedish for heart disease. That's what that means, heart disease. It's Swedish. A lot of people don't know. And a lot of people think it's the fat content that's the problem, but it's the sugar content. You look on the back of this, and the sugar is 22. Well, that's about 5.5 teaspoons of sugar per serving. That's right. And they say this container serves 4 people. 4. And speaking of ice cream, here's Fat Boy. Finally, we have some truth in advertising. You are what you eat. And everybody likes Doritos, once again, a fun food. I go to a friend's house and I'm amazed at what people eat. I mean, I like Doritos too, but not served as a vegetable. As much as possible, eat less processed foods, closer to the way they come. Consume whole fruits and vegetables, not their juices. If you find you have insulin resistance, emphasize the vegetables more than the fruits. Eat lean proteins, poultry, and fish. Use reduced fat dairy or the soy or nut milks for your calcium, and use 100% whole grain breads and cereals. Of the fat you do eat, use healthy fats like you find in olive oil, avocados, and nuts. The omega-3 fats you find in fish are good for you too. Eating this way provides you with the fundamentals of great nutrition and the best chance of maximizing your immune function, your health, and your longevity. The point is to eat food closer to the way it grows. Whole fruit, not fruit juice. A potato, not potato chips. Again, eat food closer to the way it comes. Ask yourself, does a Twinkie grow that way? No. Number 3, eat less sugar. Not only will this help you control your calories, but it may improve T cell function, a measure of immunity. Sometimes people ask me at my seminars to bottom line the topic of health. They ask for the number one change they should make. Without exception, I tell them to cut down on their bubbled, sweetened, drugged water. The biggest source of added sugar in America, soda. Even with all the artificial sweeteners that have been around for decades, Americans still eat an average of 17 teaspoons of added sugar every day. That's 272 calories extra just from sugar every day, every week, all year long. The American Heart Association recommends that women should limit their sugar intake to 6 teaspoons and men just 9. That's a lot less than 17 teaspoons. By the way, that's not just teaspoons of sugar you get out of the sugar bowl. It's the sugar that you get in soda, candy, cakes, cookies, fruit drinks, ice cream, salad dressing, ketchup, yogurt with fruit on the bottom, and everything else we eat that tickles our sweet tooth. 200 years ago, the average American ate 2 pounds of sugar per year. Today, we're up to 57 pounds per person. 57 pounds. I personally don't eat a lot of sugar, so that means one of you out there is eating my 57 pounds of sugar. You know who you are. Throughout most of human history, there has been little to no consumption of refined sugar. If a food like fruit tasted sweet, it was probably good for you. On the other hand, if it tasted bitter or sour, that may have been a clue that the food was either spoiled or poisonous. What a great system. Long before we knew anything about food safety or nutrition, our taste buds could actually tell us what to eat. We are genetically programmed to like sweet-tasting foods. Newborn babies come into this world with a preference for sweet things. That's just how we're made. So there's little wonder that we're attracted to sweets. And that's been a good thing for almost all of mankind's existence, until the last 100 years or so. Sugar, in fact, does actually do some good things. It draws water out of bacteria and so acts as a food preservative in products like jams and jellies. It keeps food moist and gives baked goods that golden brown color we like. It provides an energy source for the yeast that's used in making bread and helps extend the shelf life of bread as well. It adds texture to foods, and it's also added to canned and frozen foods to prevent browning. Now, it's important to remember that sugar is sugar is sugar. It doesn't matter if it's turbinado sugar, agave, brown sugar, or molasses. Once you eat it, it's sugar. Some people think that the sugar that comes from fruit is good for you and that the sugar that comes from candy is bad for you. Doesn't make a difference. But the sugar that comes in fruit obviously also comes with a lot of nutrition and fiber too. That's why it's fair to allow more flexibility with natural sugars like you find in fruits than sugars that simply come from candies and other sweets. For example, the sugar called lactose is the natural sugar found in milk and dairy products. It's what gives milk its sweet taste. You don't need to be concerned about naturally occurring sugars. With dairy products, along with the natural milk sugar, you're also getting a good healthy dose of calcium, vitamins, and other minerals as well. However, beware of yogurt that has fruit on the bottom. It's not so much fruit as it is preserves or jelly. These usually have a lot of extra sugar added. The nutrition label will now tell you how much added sugars the manufacturer has put in. Look for that. And since 1 teaspoon of sugar weighs 4 grams, the number of grams of sugar will tell you how many teaspoons they've added. For example, a product that has 12 grams of sugar per serving has 3 teaspoons of sugar. 12 divided by 4 is 3. In general, the less sugar added, the better. The food manufacturers have another little trick up their sleeve as well. As you probably know, ingredients on a product label are listed in descending order of weight from the most to the least. In other words, the closer an ingredient is to the beginning of the ingredient list, the more of that ingredient is in that product by weight. The items listed toward the end of the ingredient listing are in there in much smaller amounts. If the product has a lot of sugar in it, sugar will end up close to the beginning of the ingredient list. However, if the manufacturer uses a lot of different types of sugar, but in smaller amounts for each one, they end up much later on the list. For example, instead of having sugar listed as the first ingredient in a product, a manufacturer could not only use sugar, but also brown sugar, corn syrup, honey, and corn syrup solids in smaller amounts of each, and have them all end up much later on the list. Since you don't see sugar listed first, you might think there's not much in there. But you could actually, in fact, end up with more total sugar than if they had only used plain sugar by itself. That's kind of sneaky. Now, what about high fructose corn syrup? Sugar, also called sucrose, is what's called a disaccharide, and it's made up of 2 simpler monosaccharides called glucose and fructose. The cells of your body can handle glucose, but fructose can't be used by any of your cells except those in the liver. The liver, in turn, converts fructose into fat. It then stores the fat in the liver, which can cause non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or it turns it into triglycerides and sends it out into the blood. High triglycerides can cause problems, and they can lead to inflammation. Not a good thing. So while fructose does have a unique pathway of being processed, high fructose corn syrup in and of itself isn't the big issue. This is important. There isn't much difference between regular sugar and high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup only has 5% more fructose than regular sugar. The main problem with high fructose corn syrup is that it's just another additional source of sugar in the American food supply. It's cheap, and the food manufacturers put it in almost everything. Almost everything. The real problem with high fructose corn syrup is that you just end up eating more sugar. Some people come up to me after a presentation and complain that everything has high fructose corn syrup added now. They say, it's in my Doritos, it's in my Ding Dongs, it's in my Dr. Pepper, it's in my Mountain Dew, it's in everything. While they didn't mean to, they just told me a whole lot about how they eat. It's the processed foods, the fun foods, that are often the ones that are high in fructose corn syrup. The fact of the matter is you don't have to worry about high fructose corn syrup very much if you eat foods that are less processed and closer to the way they grow. In other words, real food. Number 4, consider taking vitamin D and zinc. A recent study published by the American Medical Association found that being older, in and of itself, increased the likelihood of getting COVID by 6%. What's interesting is that they also found that having a vitamin D deficiency increased the chances for getting COVID-19 virus by 77%. 77%. By the way, we know that many older people have vitamin D deficiencies. You've heard for a long time that older people are at higher risk. Could it be that these older people were not only advanced in age, but also really deficient in vitamin D? There is evidence that vitamin D can improve your immune function. Vitamin D can also prevent the excess inflammation that is characteristic of COVID-19 in its worst stages. Researchers have found that the lower a population's vitamin D levels are, the higher the number of COVID-19 cases they experienced. And the death rate from the virus was higher too. Vitamin D apparently helps regulate inflammation and control those, what they call cytokine storms, that's a factor in many of the COVID deaths. Of course, we've known for decades that vitamin D was good for the prevention of rickets in children and important for preventing osteoporosis in adults. But now there's some evidence that it may also play a role in preventing cancer, heart disease, arthritis, diabetes, and possibly even multiple sclerosis. So are you getting enough? Probably not. The current RDA for vitamin D is anywhere from 2 to 600 international units per day. Many people don't even get that. However, a lot of experts in the field, including myself, think that's not enough. The University of California, San Diego, and Creighton University have said that anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 international units of vitamin D is needed per day to decrease your risk of a number of common health problems. The Institute of Medicine says 4,000 international units per day is safe for everyday use in adults and kids 9 years of age and older. So we're talking about 10 times the official recommended amounts. Vitamin D isn't always easy to get. It's found naturally in fatty fish like salmon and tuna. It's also in egg yolks and beef liver. But you've probably been cutting down on your consumption of beef liver. I know I have. Dairy milk and milk substitutes are also fortified with vitamin D. Of course, vitamin D is known as the sunshine vitamin, since our skin can produce the vitamin when exposed to sunlight. But due to seasonal variations, you can't exclusively depend on the sun for your vitamin D. The first thing I would recommend is that you have a simple blood test done to see how much circulating vitamin D you have. Population studies suggest that a blood goal of around 50 nanomoles per liter of vitamin D is a good target. That's an important number for you to remember. You want your blood vitamin D levels to be at least 50. Maybe even a little higher is okay too. And be sure you get the 25 hydroxy vitamin D test, not the 125. Your physician can easily order this test. Frankly, you're most likely going to need to take a vitamin D supplement to get to that blood level. Make sure the vitamin D you take, by the way, is vitamin D3. Look on the label. It should tell you what form you're getting. In addition to improving your immune function, at a blood level of 50 nanomoles per liter, studies have found a lower risk of breaking a hip or other bones and also improved muscular performance and decreased likelihood of falls. In fact, the U.S. Preventive Task Force recommended vitamin D supplements for people over age 65 to help prevent falls. Then recently, based on newer research, they reversed their position and recommended against taking vitamin D. The new study involved people over 70 who started off with low blood vitamin D levels, with an average of only 20. That's very low. With supplementation, the researchers increased the participants' level up to an average of 32 after a year. They found no differences in leg muscle strength or function or in the number of falls. However, the authors of the study admitted that benefit might have been seen if higher doses had been given. I would agree. Many consider a blood level of 32 to be still very low. Vitamin D has been shown to be helpful in other areas too. Several studies have found that those with higher blood vitamin D levels also have about half the risk of colon cancer over the next decade compared to those with low levels. Vitamin D is also needed for optimal insulin secretion as well. In a review of a number of studies, those with the highest blood levels of vitamin D had 69% less risk of diabetes. And there's even been some suggestion that increasing blood vitamin D levels may help decrease the muscle discomfort that's often associated with the cholesterol medicines called statins. A presentation to the American Heart Association found that those with vitamin D levels of 20 and below had a 4 times greater risk of muscle pain compared to those with vitamin D levels of 30. And remember, 30 is still on the low side. So what should you do? Here's your homework. Here's the bottom line. First, have your physician measure your blood vitamin D levels. In my opinion, if they're under 50, you should consider a vitamin D supplement. 2,000 international units a day might be a good place to start. In about 8 weeks, test again. If you're still not approaching 50, increase your dosage. You have to experiment a little to see what dosage you practically need to get your blood levels up to 50 or so. For me, I need to take 5,000 international units of vitamin D to get my blood levels up to where they need to be. Now, there's also some suggestion that the mineral zinc plays an important role in immune function as well. Zinc deficiency is especially common in older adults. That's probably one more reason they are more susceptible to illnesses like COVID. A study found that the lower their blood zinc levels were, the more likely they were to die from it. Zinc supports and activates your body's natural killer cell function and a healthy inflammatory response. It also helps your thymus make immune T cells. Zinc has been proven to help block the coronavirus from replicating in your throat. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it will keep you from getting infected by the virus, but it may slow it down. So wash your hands and, when appropriate, wear the mask, but keep a supply of zinc lozenges on hand too. A lot of experts now believe that zinc lozenges can shorten the duration and severity of the common cold as well. In one study at the Cleveland Clinic, 50 people took the brand Coldies lozenges every 2 hours. When compared to a placebo group, those taking the zinc got over their cold 3 days earlier and had fewer symptoms like cough, headache, nasal congestion, and sore throat. The recommended maximum number of lozenges is 6 for adults and just 4 for children ages 12 to 17 per day. Younger children, interestingly, don't seem to get any benefit from taking zinc. Coldies is the brand I take, but there are other brands out there as well. And it's important that you start your zinc therapy at the very first sign of any cold symptoms. Don't wait a day or two to make sure you have a cold. By the way, don't use zinc nasal sprays. People who do tend to lose their sense of smell. The current recommended intake for zinc is about 11 milligrams per day. Hopefully, you'll find that in your multiple vitamin mineral supplement. If you choose to take a separate zinc supplement, somewhere between 15 to 30 milligrams a day should be safe and tolerated well. Number 5 on our list to improve your immune function is to engage in moderate exercise, and the key word there is moderate.
Now, this whole topic can get confusing, especially when it comes to weight control, especially when it comes to exercise too. For example, this next man is confused about exercise. He's confused about exercise. See? He's confused. His dog is skinny, that's good. These next 2 guys are confused about exercise as well. They're taking the escalator to the fitness center. They're confused. And here's something I bet you don't know. You should never swallow bubble gum during aerobics class. You should never swallow bubble gum during aerobics class. Otherwise, this could happen. So don't do that.
You've heard it before. Exercise is just plain good for you. It helps you sleep better, temporarily lowers your blood pressure, decreases your anxiety, makes your insulin work better, and helps your immunity as well. It helps you think better, too. You also decrease your risk of cardiovascular disease, many types of cancer, and type 2 diabetes. And the more exercise you do, the more benefits add up. You end up living longer, and you end up living healthier, too. Studies have found that women who walked briskly for about a half hour, 5 days a week, had about half the sick days as their sedentary counterparts. When they did get sick, their illnesses were milder. Physical activity can help you decrease your cancer risk as well. A recent analysis of 52 studies in the British Journal of Cancer found that physical activity reduced the chances of colon cancer by an average of 24%. Exercise has also been shown to decrease the risk of prostate cancer by 10 to 30%. Another study of almost 10,000 women found that physical activity could also help against getting breast cancer, especially in women older than 50. And in a different study, women who had an average of just about 1.5 hours per week of regular physical activity throughout their life seemed to reduce their breast cancer risk by 20 to 30%. However, researchers found that it took an average of about 3 hours per week to decrease risk if you have a first-degree relative with breast cancer, such as a mom, daughter, or sister. That's 3 hours per week, not per day. 3 hours per week is a bargain to potentially decrease your breast cancer risk. Several studies have also found that activity can help prevent cancer from returning as well. In one, patients with stage 3 colon cancer who exercised the equivalent of walking 6 hours or more per week at a moderate pace were only half as likely to have a reoccurrence of the colon cancer as those who exercised less than 1 hour per week. There's now also lots of research that shows that a lifetime of regular exercise can help your brain stay healthy as you get older. We know that even simple daily walking can keep the brain sharp and improve memory. Surprisingly, you can still get benefit from physical activity even if you start when you're older. A study done at the University of Illinois looked at 2 groups of older adults for 6 months. One group did stretching and toning exercises. The other group walked briskly 3 times a week. At the end of the 6-month trial, only the walkers' cognitive abilities increased. Exercising for periods longer than 30 minutes seems to be better for brain health than shorter sessions. Of course, staying physically active helps you age better, too. We've known that for a long time. You maintain a stronger heart and stronger muscles. You're more flexible, and you're less likely to fall. As we get older, the region of your brain involved in memory, called the hippocampus, tends to shrink in size, which leads to memory loss. Research now shows that exercise can actually reverse that process. Your goal is 150 minutes a week of moderate aerobic exercise like a brisk walk, or 75 minutes per week of a more intense exercise like jogging or using an exercise bicycle. Weight training exercises may also increase the levels of growth factors in the brain. So be sure to include some type of weight-resistive exercise at least twice a week. And stretch after your workout, not before. You'll get more benefit when your muscles are warmer. Obviously, you need to exercise. Most of us aren't doing enough. But here's a word of warning. Too much of a good thing can be too much. Some people go to extremes. Yeah, I'm going to be doing an Ironman triathlon next week, but just to make it harder, I'm going to jog backwards. What's interesting is that very intense exercise does not seem to help immunity. In fact, it hurts it. Studies show that after a marathon, participants are more susceptible to infections. But let's put this into perspective. Most of us are not in danger of hurting our immunity because we exercise too intensely. We're in danger of hurting our immunity because we don't exercise enough. Number 6, find ways to control stress. When compared to those who are more calm and relaxed, those under stress are more likely to develop colds, are slower to heal from wounds, and are less responsive to vaccines. As a professional speaker, I've presented to hundreds of groups over my career. Even though public speaking is always ranked as one of the most stressful experiences by Americans, It's just part of my job. It's quite routine. Doesn't bother me at all. But I did have one presentation that was quite stressful, and it was simply because of the size of the audience. I spoke in Anaheim, California for a group called the $1 Million Roundtable. This group was made up of a worldwide audience of top performers in the insurance industry. And that audience had 7,000 people in it. I couldn't even see the back of the room. Now, I don't normally get nervous, but I was nervous that day. On top of that, a big part of the audience could not understand English. There were 9 different foreign languages represented that day. So as I looked out on this room of 7,000 people, most of them have headphones on so they could listen to an interpreter every time I said a sentence or two. But if I said something funny, the English speakers would laugh right away. Then about 5 seconds later, the Koreans would laugh. Then 5 seconds later, the Chinese would laugh. It was all quite stressful. I'll admit, I took 2 Imodium before I went on stage. The only thing I wanted moving was my mouth. Staying socially connected is also a great method of helping control stress. We really were designed to be in relationship with one another. Social isolation and loneliness can increase inflammation and make you more susceptible to all kinds of illnesses. Women are better than this than men. Ladies, I bet if I ask you, you could probably name 3 or 4 close personal girlfriends, right? The average man in this country has just 1 close male friend. One study showed that not having a close personal friend or confidant was just as dangerous to your health as being a smoker.
Number 5 is social connectedness. That is being part of the bigger community. It turns out that people really do need people after all. There's no Lone Rangers out there when it comes to being a long-lived, healthy human. In fact, one study found that not having a close personal friend or confidant is just as dangerous to your health as if you were a smoker. Isn't that amazing? Not having a close personal friend or confidant gives you the same risk to your long-term health as if you are a smoker. So what that means is if you must have a cigarette, do it with a friend.
You know what also causes a lot of stress? Being sick. Not only mental stress, but physical stress. Every year, 91,000 Americans die from a heart attack or stroke triggered by the flu. A large study found that when those with cardiovascular disease get a flu shot, they cut their risk of having another cardiovascular event by 50%. 50%. And if that wasn't good enough, you decreased your chances of getting the flu. Remember the last time you had the flu? Remember how miserable you were? Remember the last time you had a heart attack? Remember how you almost died? Go to the drugstore and get a flu shot. No appointment necessary. Have your doctor give you a shingles shot too. Everyone over 60 should get one, and those over 50 with cardiovascular disease should get one as well. The shot reduces the risk of shingles by about 70%. If you've ever known anyone with shingles and see the agony they go through, you will get the shot. Besides, people who get shingles are up to 4 times as likely to have a stroke. If you ever had chicken pox, you need to get the shingles vaccine. If you're over 65, you need to get a pneumonia shot as well. If you have cardiovascular disease and you're over 50, you need to get one too. Regardless of your age, if you get a pneumonia shot, your risk of having a heart attack or stroke goes down. So get a flu shot, get a shingles shot, and one to help prevent pneumonia as well. And of course, the COVID vaccine. Just go do it. Yes, I know that's a lot of shots. Yes, it's true, they're not 100% effective, but they're a lot better than nothing. Look, if you're going to die from something we don't know how to cure. Don't let your life get cut short from something we already know how to prevent or fix. That would just be dumb. There's been thousands of books written on stress management. You've heard all the general advice. Take a deep breath, sit back, relax, meditate. Don't worry about everything. But how do you really do that? You know, not that long ago, we used to shut everything down in this country one day a week. Most businesses were closed on Sunday. Back then, you had to take care of everything in 6 days. Most everyone took off on Sunday. Closed on Sunday was the rule. A number of people, myself included, still do take one day off a week. We downshift. we unplug. We spend time with family and friends, go to church, and this is important. We don't use that day to cut the grass, wash the car, or catch up with everything else. It's a day set aside for us. Purposely resting one day a week helps you put things in perspective. You start to realize that the world does not revolve around you. You get to take some of that weight of the world off your shoulders. It's a day set aside for our mental, spiritual, and physical well-being. If the stresses of life seem to be more and more of a problem for you, why don't you try it? It won't hurt. It might help a lot. Another major contributor to stress is lack of sleep. You know, sleep is important. One study found that those who averaged less than 7 hours of sleep a night were 3 times more likely to catch a cold than those who averaged 8. Hey, you know what? I think it's time for a quiz question. Let's look at this. Before the light bulb was invented, how many hours of sleep did the average American get? Now I'm going to give you 30 seconds. You answer your best guess over in the chat room or whatever is available. Is it 7.5 hours? Is it 8.5 hours? 9.5 hours? 10? Or 10.5 hours? What's your best guess? I'm going to be quiet for 30 seconds. You vote now. Okay, well, we're back, and man, your answers were all over the place. You know, a lot of people guessed 10 hours. That's not right. How about 8.5 hours? Nope, sorry. The correct answer was C. Before the light bulb was invented, the average American got 9.5 hours. How'd you do? By the way, we know the average American does best on about 8.25 hours sleep a night. According to a recent study done by MetLife, the number one complaint among workers today is not job security or economic uncertainty. The number one complaint is being tired. It sounds great to be able to work from home, but as many of us have found out, those home working conditions are not always the best. You can have distractions from kids and spouses and Netflix and YouTube and a million other things. Trying to get work done under those conditions can be exhausting. A recent survey by Consumer Reports of 4,000 Americans found 27% of them said they had trouble falling asleep or staying asleep most nights. Almost 70% said they had trouble sleeping at least one night a week. That's a lot of tired people. Too little sleep can affect how you physically function when you're awake. Poor quality sleep is linked to vascular inflammation, dementia, Alzheimer's, and other diseases. If you're one of those people who struggle with sleep, talk to your physician. I was one of those people. For years, I slept an average of 9 hours a night and still was tired all the time. I needed a nap every afternoon. I finally had a sleep study done, and they found out I had something called restless leg syndrome. Now, I'll admit that doesn't sound like a serious disease, but it turns out that it kept me from getting into that very deep REM sleep that we all need. I was sleeping, but it wasn't a good quality sleep. We fixed the problem, and I don't need naps anymore. You need enough sleep. It's not a waste of time. A lot of important things go on when you're sleeping. Your body releases hormones that help repair cells and control the body's use of energy. Your blood pressure drops and your body can work at healing itself. Recent studies also show that sleep can affect the efficiency of vaccinations. Research found that well-rested people who get the flu shot are less likely to come down with the flu than those who get the shot but don't get enough sleep. Of course, it's important that you prepare for a good night's sleep, too. The room should be cool, dark, and quiet. If you're sensitive to noise, earplugs and a white noise machine can have a great impact on your ability to get and stay asleep. A regular bedtime seems to help as well. And remember, you should never watch television in your bedroom. You don't need to be seeing the latest news about politicians, wars, and terrorists around the world just before you try to fall asleep. The bedroom should be used for two things: sleep and, well, you know what the other one is. If you can, one of the best ways to deal with stress is by changing the circumstances that are causing the problem. That may mean taking a different position, a different business partner, or even a new spouse. Easier said than done, especially the spouse part. But Albert Einstein once said the definition of insanity is repeating the same behaviors over and over and expecting a different result. As dramatic as it may be, in some circumstances, the only way to deal with a stressor is to take yourself out of the equation. And having said all this, one of the best things that will help you deal with the stresses of life is the miracle medicine called physical activity. Have I mentioned that before? At the risk of being redundant, you need to exercise. Lots of people have found it's the very best way for them to deal with stress. And of course, it's just plain good for your health, whether you have stress or not. Unfortunately, lots of people turn to food to help with stress. And it works. For a while. They feel better. But you can pay a high price for that kind of stress management. Did you gain some weight during COVID? A lot of people did. And that brings us to number 7 for immune power. Lose a couple of pounds. People have been cooking and eating more, baking and eating more, eating and eating more. Weight gain is not a symptom of COVID, but it can be a consequence. We know that those that are overweight are more susceptible to all kinds of health problems. The COVID virus made that point very well. Being overweight seems to decrease your body's ability to fight off the germs that can make you sick. Being too heavy causes inflammation in the body. The virus causes inflammation too. You put those two together and it's like you've set your house on fire while you're still in it. Of course, those that struggle with their weight are also more susceptible to heart attacks, strokes, high blood pressure, cancer, arthritis, and all kinds of other problems too. The good news is that you don't ever have to get back to your ideal weight to see some major improvements in your health. Slightly decreasing calories, along with losing just a few extra pounds, seems to improve your body's immune function by increasing the activity of something called T cells. These T cells are a type of white blood cell that finds and destroys cells in your body that are producing viruses. Just losing 5% of your body weight can also dramatically decrease your risk of diabetes, arthritis, heart disease, and if you're a woman, breast cancer. Keep in mind, if you weigh 200 pounds, a 5% weight loss is just 10 pounds. That's a lot of potential health benefits from losing just a little bit of weight. So stop thinking that you have to get back to what you weighed in high school. Since the 1960s, the average man's weight has gone from 166 pounds to 191 pounds. During that same time, the average woman's weight has gone from 140 pounds to 164 pounds. The average 10-year-old today is 10 pounds heavier than they were back then. The average teenage girl is 10 pounds heavier than they were back then, and the average teenage boy weighs 15 pounds more than his counterpart did back in 1960. And remember, those are averages. A lot of Americans are bigger, much bigger. Manufacturers of crash test dummies have had to redesign their products as a result. Old models represented a person weighing 169 pounds. New models will simulate a human at 270 pounds. So now, the age-old question, how do you take weight off? And more importantly, keep it off? We're starting to get a brand new appreciation of why we're getting fatter. And this is something you may never have heard of before. Something called insulin resistance or prediabetes just may be the reason you can't lose weight and keep it off. First, some background. Insulin is a hormone produced by your pancreas that allows the blood sugar to enter the cells of your body. Now keep in mind that the sugar in your blood is just your digested food. It's not bad, as long as it doesn't get too high. But as you gain weight, as you become more sedentary, and especially as you get older, the cells of your body become less responsive to your insulin. Your cells become insulin resistant. They see the insulin in your blood, but they don't respond to it like they should. As a result, the sugar in your blood stays high. To compensate for this, your pancreas produces even more insulin. Insulin levels of the blood go up, and finally the cells respond and let the blood sugar in. The problem with all this, and this is the point, is that high insulin levels in your blood send a signal to the fat cells of your body to produce more fat and keep fat from being released, exactly the opposite of what you want if you're trying to lose weight. Ironically, all the time this is going on, your fasting blood sugar levels may appear normal when tested by your doctor. Your A1C levels may be normal as well. How's that possible? Your pancreas simply starts working overtime by producing extra insulin to keep your blood sugar numbers normal. But your insulin levels are going too high. And if that wasn't all bad enough, those high insulin levels are also damaging your blood vessels that can lead to a heart attack or stroke. You can have high insulin levels for years without ever showing any symptoms. Eventually, your pancreas can't produce what you need anymore. Then your doctor one day tells you have diabetes. But you don't suddenly get diabetes one day. You develop it over years. When the pancreas can no longer do its job, you're given the diagnosis of diabetes. So what you need to do is catch this problem long before the doctor gives you that bad news. How do you tell if you have insulin resistance? The best test is what's called a 4-hour glucose tolerance test with insulin response. It's now available at Quest labs around the United States, but your physician has to order it for you. But an even simpler way to determine if you have insulin resistance is to simply look at your most recent blood work results and take your blood triglyceride level number and divide it by your good HDL cholesterol number. Again, triglyceride number divided by your good HDL cholesterol number. For example, someone with a triglyceride level of 120 and an HDL of 55 would have a result of 2.18. If the answer is over a value of 2, you probably have insulin resistance. Again, when you take your triglyceride number and divide it by your HDL number, and you get an answer of 2 or over, you probably have insulin resistance. It's estimated that at least 50% of adults over the age of 50 have insulin resistance or prediabetes. And the Centers for Disease Control says that about 90% of them are not aware of it. And the numbers are surprisingly high for younger people too. Remember, our goal here is to help you lose weight, but with insulin resistance, it's almost impossible to do so. So how do you fix this? To restore your cell's insulin sensitivity, insulin levels need to come down. How do you do that? Something called intermittent fasting seems to be an effective method. By eating in a smaller window of time during the day, you allow your cells to rest from constant exposure to insulin. That makes them more responsive again when insulin does come along. Exercise also helps restore insulin sensitivity. Those with insulin resistance seem to respond best to diets that are lower in carbohydrates, especially those carbs that are refined and contain a simple sugar. If you're an average American, you're eating a good amount of those already. They probably also will have more success in losing weight if they eat less bread, cereal, rice, potatoes, and fruit juices. Intermittent fasting comes in several varieties. First is the 5-2 plan. In this approach, people dramatically cut their calories 2 days out of 7 in the week. On those 2 days, they may eat anywhere from just 500 to 600 calories, or they may eat nothing at all. On the other 5, they consume their normal intake. For some people, this actually does seem to be easier than daily restriction of calories as in a traditional low-calorie diet. Then there's the 16-8 approach. In this version, food is consumed in a window of approximately 8 hours, followed by a fast the next 16 hours. It appears that the body starts burning fat somewhere in the 9 to 12 hours after your last meal, depending on the size of that meal. Many people find that skipping breakfast is a good way to apply this approach. Since an individual is theoretically sleeping about 8 hours a night, and then if no breakfast is consumed, the first meal of the day would be in the late morning or at noon. Another snack or light meal in the mid-afternoon is followed in the early evening by the final meal, all within the 8-hour window. Some recent research suggests that an 18-6 pattern is even better, that is, eating your 2 meals in a 6-hour window. For many people, intermittent fasting every day seems to be easier than a full-day fast twice a week. But is it okay to skip breakfast? Many older studies associated skipping breakfast with a higher risk of obesity and other health problems. But as in so many human observational studies, cause and effect is not proven. It could be that overweight people have poor eating habits, one of which is skipping meals. That doesn't mean that skipping breakfast caused the obesity. There are plenty of thin people out there who don't eat anything in the morning. I'm one of them. The importance of breakfast for adults has been overemphasized. In fact, a new study published in the British Medical Journal concluded that in adults, quote, breakfast may not be a good strategy for weight loss, unquote. Many people find the intermittent fasting approach combined with reduced carbohydrate intake gives them a formula for success. Of course, it's still important to emphasize eating less fried, processed, and sugary foods. Emphasis should be on eating more vegetables, lean protein, and higher fiber foods. Healthy fats like nuts and their butters are also a good idea as well. And as always, it's important to drink water and stay hydrated when you're doing any form of fasting. And it's always good to clear any changes in your diet with your physician and registered dietitian, especially if you have any medical conditions. Those individuals who are dependent upon insulin or taking blood sugar lowering medications should especially be cautious. Pregnant and breastfeeding women also have higher nutritional needs than normal and need to consult a physician before starting such a routine. So far, most studies on intermittent fasting in humans have been of short duration and with a small number of subjects. As of now, intermittent fasting does not seem to be superior to traditional calorie restriction diets as far as weight loss is concerned. And some research suggests you may be more likely to lose more muscle on this type of diet, so it's very important that you get adequate protein and exercise. But the key difference with intermittent fasting seems to be that it's easier to follow for many people. That could be the difference between failure and success. Since I graduated with my master's degree in nutrition many years ago, I've been taught that carbohydrates are good for you. That was the official government line too. If you remember the food pyramid, the foundation was based on breads, cereals, and other carbohydrates. I ate lots of whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, and fruits and vegetables. I was a big cereal eater as well. I did what I was told, and eventually my weight went up to about 200 pounds. A lot of us can't handle carbs like when we were younger. If you're like me and are over 50, there's a good chance you have insulin resistance. It turns out I had it too. I've now dramatically cut down on my carbohydrates. I eat my first meal in the morning around 11:30, and I eat dinner at about 6 p.m., maybe a light snack in the mid-afternoon. And that's it. It did work for me. I lost 21 pounds over about 5 months and kept it off for several years now. For weight loss, those people with insulin resistance do better on a low carbohydrate diet. Get rid of added sugars. Cut down on starches and grains. Surprisingly, in today's grocery store, even whole wheat bread is highly processed. While it contains all the components of the whole grain, it still gets quickly digested and can raise blood sugar levels. That makes your insulin levels go up. Eat less pastas and ready-to-eat cereals as well. Fortunately, you don't have to be concerned about the carbs in non-starchy vegetables. Eat as many vegetable-based dishes as you can. And while exercise is absolutely essential for good health, it by itself does not equal weight loss. Diet is where the potential is for losing weight. So, in the last few moments we have left, let's review. While there are a number of steps you can take to increase your immune function, the major ones we talked about today are, number 1, practice prevention. Wash your hands, get your shots. Number 2, eat quality food. Eat closer to the way it grows. Less processed, more plant-based, less animal-based. Number 3, cut down on the amount of sugar you take in. Remember, soft drinks are the number 1 source. Number 4, consider taking a vitamin D3 supplement. Be sure you're getting enough zinc as well. Number 5, moderate exercise. Not too much, not too little. 75 minutes to 150 minutes per week. Number 6 is reduce stress. Consider taking 1 day off a week. Make it just for you. And finally, number 7, lose a couple of pounds. Well, that's it for today. I'm David Meinz. Thanks for being with me for Immune Power. I hope you'll join me for our next program in this series called Brain Power, where you'll discover how to make sure your brain is working at maximum efficiency. And finally, in part 3, called Vitamin Power, where we'll look at what I call the 7 super nutrients that you need to seriously consider for optimal health. And I hope we also have a chance to get together for one of my in-person keynote presentations as well. You'll learn a lot, and you'll have a good time too. See you soon.